Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Uplifting Content Podcast. My guest today is Gary John Bishop, and we're going to be talking about personal empowerment and life mastery. Gary, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, and thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
My pleasure. And it's lovely to hear a Glaswegian accent, a man from Glasgow living in Orlando. Tell me how that came about.
Yeah. Well, my accent is kind of, I've got this like terrible transatlantic drawl now. So I'm stuck somewhere between Dolly Parton and Sean Connery, I'm afraid. I've been here for
very unique.
Yeah. So I've been here for 25 years going on now. And I really came here on a bit of a whim. Like, I knew somebody who lived here, and this was in 1994. Mm-hmm. And so I just went for it. I thought, well, I had a 6-month visa. I'll go over and scoot around a while. Mm-hmm. And then while I was here in Florida, actually, I used to be a musician, so I got a record deal here. And when the days when it was called a record deal.
What is it now? A streaming deal? Like,
I don't know. It's some kind of like CD deal. I don't know, a download deal. But anyway, these were the days when I got a record deal, and so I did that. I was a professional musician for about 9 years of my life, mm-hmm. and then I got into this personal development thing, this growth, and I was such a hesitant participant in it. I didn't. And I was like, Glaswegians don't do this.
That was exactly my question. How does a guy from Glasgow end up doing personal development? It's just not typical. It's not.
And even the way it was presented to me, it was, do you want to do a workshop? I'm like, what do you mean a workshop? I don't do workshops. What do you mean workshopping about? A workshop's where you lift hammers and nails and so I had this big thing about it, anyway, I decided I was going to do. I went and did a workshop, and
you participated in one. Somebody had invited you to participate.
I did, and it was such a departure from what I had imagined. I'd imagined we were going to go there and start, discussing our chakras and holding hands, and I was like,
which are some workshops, I do have to say.
That's fine. Look, that's fine. I just, it's like kind of where I was. I had this really cynical view of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But it was great. I went in there, and the person was like, "You're a jerk," and I'm like, "Hey, this is awesome. I love this. This is great. I'm a jerk." And that was kind of like my introduction to the world of personal growth. So I had. One of the reasons why I kind of got into it was a very specific kind of workshop. It was based in ontology and a little bit of phenomenology, which are aspects of philosophy that I just became fascinated by. I poured myself into it. And then pretty rapidly, I became a senior program director for one of the largest personal growth and development companies in the world. And ironically enough, I traveled the world delivering workshops to thousands and thousands of people in just about every corner of the world you can imagine. And then I stopped doing that about 5 years ago. I started my own little coaching business on the side. And then I started writing books. Mm-hmm. And once I'd written my first book, I was really bitten by the bug. I love writing. I love delivering this kind of work to people. And then it has my own little spin on what it is to transform a life, right? So my approach isn't a particularly sympathetic one. I'm compassionate. I have a lot of compassion for people, and I'm a champion for people. But I have less tolerance for your BS than you do, right. And that's a lot of what people are gravitating towards. That's what they want to be part of. They want the message delivered right between the eyeballs. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of my style.
I mean, just hearing your journey, it makes so much sense. Like from where you've come from to getting in this workshop where the guy's just like saying it how it is. And then now your work, and I mean, your first book specifically, very successful. Unfuck Yourself, for anyone that doesn't know, get out of your head and into your life. Just saying it like it is. And I love that some people just need that. Some people like the more sort of gentle, nurturing, chakras and all that type of stuff. And some people just like it how it is. And that's great.
I mean, not like, look, there's a lot of like metaphysical stuff that for some people that is how it is, right? Right. My reality is any better than your reality. I don't really mean it like that. But when I wrote my first book, it was designed like almost in a kind of like rebellion against the self-help industry, right? I'm not into concepts and abstract ideas that have you kind of ponder your belly button for 6 months before making any real change in your life. So I go into the depths of some pretty intense philosophy and then reconstruct it for people in a way that might actually make a difference. So, you know, I would say the kind of people that are into the work that I do are the kind of cynical self-help people, but it also includes people that have done tons of self-help and notice that they're still kind of spinning their wheels.
Right.
I mean, I guess in some ways you could say what you get out of participating in my work is you get motivated, but I'm not motivational, right? So I'm not like, you can do it.
Not Tony Robbins.
No,
music blasting.
I just don't have the magnificence that has teeth to be Tony Robbins. I'm more like gnarly little Scottish man than
so you had to choose. You had to find another way.
Right, we got to kind of like, my approach is more angry hobbit than. So anyway, my love of people, and I have this big. I love people, and I really do, even when they're a pain, right? People, because I know what it is to be stuck. You know, I am people, right? I've been stuck in many areas in my life. I've lived a life where the past has been like a shadow cast across everything that I did, even in ways that I couldn't even imagine. So I'm out to give people profound, life-changing ideas and deliver it in such a way that they can make change and they can make it today. They don't have to wait.
Yes, I want to hear about some of this. So, just going back to, I think the word you said was not oncology. That's that's some other type of medical.
Right. No, ontology with a T.
Gotcha. I was like, right. I see on here. So, can you tell me a bit more about the philosophies that, and I'm assuming these are the ones that you sort of carry through with your work. Just to explain a bit more about those.
Well, if you think about it, it's all kind of like under the umbrella of existentialism, right? So it goes all the way back to the Stoic philosophers who, for me, were the first existentialists. But all the way up to people like Martin Heidegger, who is a German ontological philosopher, Gadamer, Husserl, even Sartre, the French existentialist. So they had a way of describing what it is to be a human being, right? They had a way of capturing that, right? And so, and particularly with Heidegger, I mean, Heidegger as a human being wasn't exactly the best of human beings, but he had some brilliant ideas. But he's a very, very challenging guy to read, right? And I don't have any formal education, so I'm just basically hacking through this with a Scottish broadsword, trying to make sense of it for myself. But so far so good, you know. I mean, I'm pretty much kind of trained myself enough to be able to hang with what Heidegger says and understand it, even though it's translated from German.
What is their definition of what it means to be a human? Sort of the crux of their beliefs.
It is kind of long and complex, right? But
can you summarize?
Fundamentally, you are a being,
right?
So you think about that like you exist on a spectrum of being, and when you were born, that spectrum was whole and complete. It was wide and varied. So that is, there were lots of ways as a human being that you could be when you were a kid.
Right.
As you've aged, the availability of all of that has become less and less and less.
Right. As we get molded and conditioned.
Right. So you're now more Ione than the Ione that started this. Right? You're now very defined Ione. And that defined Ione has very distinct characteristics, and it also has a very kind of definitive range of problems that person deals with. And some of them, in fact, a lot of them are recurring. So they're like, and I'm not using you as an example here. I want anybody who's listening to kind of put themselves in this. But so you've become this defined, polarized version of what you started with. And a lot of what Heidegger does is, well, how come Like what happened, right? And in my new book, Stop Doing That Shit, I actually really lay it out for you, like not only how you became you, but the blueprint for your belief system. Like, how did you end up believing what you believe, right?
Right.
And most people, would say, we talk about things like self-limiting beliefs, but you don't know you've got self-limiting beliefs. For you, it's true.
Yeah.
It's not a belief. Like, I believe, I believe I don't like onions, right? That's one thing. Or I believe that onions are, grown in the ground, or I believe that I prefer cars over buses, or I believe this thing. But there are fundamental truths that you are so imbued by them.
Yeah.
You don't even get that there's an alternative.
Right.
There's some other way that could be.
Right.
And then so it kind of bleeds into some of the philosophy of people like Gadamer and Husserl, who said, and Heidegger said this too, actually. Heidegger's statement was, language is the house of being. What did he mean? He meant who you be. That is, the being that you've become is completely a function of the conversation that you're in with yourself and others, nothing else. Yeah. And it seems like I'm emotionally constrained, and it seems like my moods or my outlook, it's all housed in the kind of cacophony of language that you engage with every day.
Because if we didn't have language, there wouldn't be anxiety or depression, or there wouldn't be, like, you wouldn't.
Well, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you have something that you don't have language for it?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, and people might say, well, you could see it. I know, but how would you know what you're seeing? So it's in the distinctions of language, right? I mean, there are quantum physicists that would say we exist in a universe the likes of which we only can see and interact with a tiny part of it. There's a whole bunch going on
that we're not aware of.
We're not aware of it. We don't even. I mean, in terms of like science, you are surrounded by spectrums of light that you have zero awareness of.
Yeah.
And it could be killing you, and you have no idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you try on the notion that the constraints of your life are actually housed, and it was Gadamer, I believe, that said, and I'm going to bastardize what he said because he said it a lot better than I would say it. But anyway, he said something along the lines of, the experience of being alive can be found in the grammar of the language, right? It really literally is in the nuances. People relate to language like, oh, it's just semantics, right? Or language doesn't matter. Well, language doesn't matter until I say something that pisses you off.
Right.
And apparently it matters.
Yes.
Right?
One of my favorite, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. The first one is be impeccable with your word, and understanding that your word, you can use it as magic. You can use it to inspire people to create. And then it can also be just black magic. Hitler used language to dehumanize people and get away with a lot of the stuff that he did. Right. So they're not just words. What we say to ourselves is how we live our lives. So, yeah. Right.
And the problem we have as human beings is, I mean, those are great examples you've given, and they're ones that we can see and we're aware of. You're not aware of the shroud that you live in.
Right.
You're just not aware of it. It just seems like, this is this way, that is that way, this is this way.
Yeah, don't question.
Right. Doesn't seem like language is doing all of that.
I had someone ask me the question once, what do you know for a fact that you haven't been told by someone else? Like, what do you know to be true that has not come from someone telling you, like, without a shadow of a doubt? And kind of the only thing that I can think of is I exist and that I love. I love, or I have loving feelings. Everything else are things that people have said. And another thing on this point about, not even realizing, I interviewed Dr. Bruce Lipton a few months back, who's sort of behind has a book called The Science of Biology and stuff. And he was saying that a lot of our subconscious programming, it happens when we're so young, we don't know that it's happening, exactly what you're saying here. And the only way that you can really identify what those programs are the things that are not showing up in life that you want, means that there's something wrong with the programming. That's what needs to be worked on. Because oftentimes you can't go, I don't feel like I deserve wealth because I was told we're not always aware enough to figure out that that's what it is. So if you're struggling to keep money, then you know that that's a program that needs some work on, and there's some internal language in there that you need to address.
I take a slightly different angle on it, like a slightly different one. I think you would end up at the same place, but in my latest book, I say, well, what if everything you're doing is the point? Like, what if everything you're doing? What if all the failed relationships? This is how it's supposed to go for you. And people are like, no, I really want a great relationship. I know, and they say stuff like, I just keep attracting toxic people, right? And I'll say, well, what if you're actually finding them, like you're hunting them down? What if you're actually looking for people to get in a relationship with that ultimately, one way that I've discovered that I could uncover something that I was subconsciously driven to do was to confront the idea, like, well, what if I keep doing it? Right? So the area that I always kind of gravitate towards are the areas that we sabotage. Like, this should be going well for me. It goes along quite well for a while, and then I always end up like kind of going back to ground zero with my finances or my body or relationships, whatever the thing might be. So I started from the opposite end. I said, well, what if that's the point? What if I'm supposed to keep coming back to this? What if this is like some kind of gravity for me? Like, when I get back here, it confirms what I know, and then I go ahead and try and, overcome it again. So the very eloquent phrase that I use in my book is that I said, it seems like we're in a constant cycle of fucking ourselves over only to save ourselves from what fucked us over in the first place and then go back to it, right? So we're in this cycle of like screwing ourselves to save ourselves. And my assertion is that if you look at your life, you'll see, like, there are times in your life when your behavior flies in the face of everything that you know to do. Like, you actually do stuff that you're saying to yourself, I shouldn't do this thing. And yet I'm compelled to do it, like spending money that I don't have, right? Like, there's $100 left in my credit card, and I'm like, I got to save that. I can't spend that money. And then there I am. Well, just this time, like the last time and the time before. So as human beings, we are fundamentally attracted to certainty. What better way to have life be certain than to keep repeating the same problems over and over? Why would I do that? Because I know that I survive it. And I'll leave myself with the illusion that over short periods of time, it seems like I'm getting somewhere, and then back I go. And then I'm getting somewhere, and then back I go. And in the new book, I really talk about a whole new way to take your life on, because that cycle of self-sabotage, uninterrupted, and all the willpower in the world won't save you, will run your life.
So, because when you first started saying this, I thought that the idea was to continue, like, going up, because you said, what if you are just supposed to keep going for repeating these patterns, right? And I'm like, but yeah, that sucks. So we do want to stop it if there are patterns that aren't working for us. So what are some of the ways that you work with people on changing this? Because you're saying willpower alone won't do it. What have you found that does help?
Yeah, so mostly we live our lives in pursuit, right? So Sartre would have called it the pursuit of happiness.
Love that film, by the way, the Will Smith film.
Right. But when Sartre said the pursuit of happiness, my take on that is whatever happiness is for you, right? So it might be like peace and quiet, right, is what I'm pursuing, or love or affinity or connection. But there's some destination in the back of our minds that if we pursue that thing, we'll get there. And that when we get there, life is going to turn out for us, right? And if you look at humanity over a long period of time, you'll see we are in pursuit of what's better. So we want things to be better. The problem with that is, and this is part of like the flip side of it, what you're admitting is this ain't it. So you're saying happiness for me, or whatever that is for me, I can't have that right now. Like, that's a day in the future. And we are hardwired to pursue, right? And for those of you that have ever struggled with going on vacation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you can't sit still. Like, you're compelled to do the next thing. And that's been the same. If anybody looks in their life, you'll see, no matter your accomplishments, the sense of accomplishment is fleeting.
Yeah.
Like, it's there, and then it's like, okay, now what? Right? I mean, a lot of people, for instance, go to college with a notion, and once I'm done with that, I'll be good to go. And then you do it, and you come out of there and you're like, shit, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
So what do I do now? Well, maybe I should I'll get a career. That's what I'll do. I'll pursue. You're going to your mid-30s. You're like, shit, this isn't working.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I need to be in a relationship. That's what I'll do. It's time for me to settle down. That's the missing piece. I'll settle down. Shit, this isn't it. Maybe I need to get some kids. That's what I do, because kids, that'll be the reason for being alive. That's my purpose in life, right? To procreate. I have children. I'm like, this is terrible. What am I think I need a divorce. Your life is always later.
Chasing, yeah.
Right. And if you start with the notion that that's what your life is about, it's a pursuit of something. So I say to people, the pursuit that you're in, even though you're pretty convinced this is the right track for you, will ultimately disappoint you, because it'll never fill the hole. In fact, a lifetime of trying to fill the hole only emphasizes that there's a hole there. Like, there's something about you that you're not okay with.
Yeah.
At a very profound level, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I say to people, well, and this is a kind of complex thing, but nonetheless, that pursuit is a past-based phenomenon. That is, you live your life overcoming something about yourself that you've already determined. And you've so already determined that thing that you're just in it. You're not completely even aware of it. So I'll give you an example. So in Stop Doing That Shit, I reveal a subconscious conclusion of mine that I discovered a few years ago, right? And the subconscious conclusion is, I'm not smart enough, right? And it's very subtle. Yeah. I'm not walking around like freaking Eeyore, like, oh, smart enough, you know.
But it impacts your
well, I'm organized around it. It's kind of sitting there in the unspoken. But if you looked at my life, you would see that I followed a pathway of somebody who thought that they weren't smart enough. So you would witness it. You'd be like, oh my gosh, he didn't go to college. Oh my gosh, he doesn't engage in that kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, he barely does this. He never does that. All because those things would throw up in my face what I fundamentally concluded about myself. Now, I'm a human being, right? I pursue.
Help me understand that point again. So you're saying your wife thought that about you, or
I thought that about myself.
Okay, so you thought that she thought those things about you.
No,
okay.
I think I was saying the word life, but anyway, I thought at a very fundamental level that I wasn't smart enough. Right.
Okay. Did you say life or wife? Because I thought
life.
Life. Sorry, I thought your wife.
That's a running accent. I swear to God.
I'm glad we clarified that, because I was like, your wife thought what about you? That doesn't make sense. Okay.
No.
It doesn't sound very nice.
But my view of myself at a very fundamental level is that I'm not smart enough. And so I followed the life of that.
By not going to college, not doing certain things because you didn't think you were smart enough. That makes sense. Yeah.
But I was still successful. But like all human beings, you are successful in the life you've chosen, whether you realize or not. The question was, what if I took my life in a different pathway? What if I went a different way, where I could challenge the notion, this kind of subconscious notion, that I'm not smart enough? So that conclusion that I came to, like the one that you've come to about yourself, for the people who are listening to this right now, it's a past-based phenomenon. You live your life with this illusion that the future is the answer, and that the present ain't it, and that the present is made up of what's been, right? So you end up with this really kind of profound insight. Well, at least I did. right? And the profound insight that I was left with is that my life was completely cause and effect. It was completely what has been is the template for what's to come.
Yeah.
So I'm already trapped. I'm already in a matrix of the past. And which got me into the English philosopher Alan Watts, who has these brilliant insights about causality. Yeah. And he said the illusion of causality, the illusion for human beings, and for me it's a superstition, by the way, it's something we believe to be true that's actually bullshit. But it's a superstition that causality only travels in one direction from the past to the present. So that is, what's happening to me today is a function of what happened this morning or yesterday or last year or last month. He says, and he introduced this notion, I don't know if he introduced it, but anyway, that's where I got introduced to it, of reverse causality. That is, that could be caused by something that hasn't even happened yet. But I'd have to create it as an outcome, like a potential. So if I start to deal with, well, let me create something called writing a book. I'm going to write a book. That's something that hasn't happened yet. It exists in kind of nebulous idea of the future in my mind. But what if I had that future influence me right now? Like, what does it cause me to do? What does it cause me to kind of confront about myself? Like the future is calling me to be someone and do something that past me is always trying to get over.
Yeah.
So that's in effect how I live my life. I live my life not given by, I mean, I have all the brain patterns and some of the emotional states of the past, but I'm not influenced by it. I'm not deterred by the past. Right. I'm completely influenced by what I create, like we talked about earlier, in language.
Right.
So being impeccable with my word.
Yes. So it's two things. It's one of the philosophies I really like about Buddhism is this idea of absolute happiness and relative happiness. And right. Relative happiness being things that you seek from other things. This idea that you were saying of chasing. When I get that job, I'll be happy. When I get a family, I'll be happy. When I get my house, I'll be happy. And with the problem with all of those things is they're nothing that they're just so what's the word? I forget what the word that they use. They're never guaranteed to last. These things, it will always change. So if you put your happiness in something that is always going to change and is going to end eventually, that's you're kind of chasing nothing. But whereas absolute happiness is the thing that cannot be changed, and that's you, and that's here, and that's now, and that can be obtained. So that's kind of the one part of what you're saying. And then I love this idea of not being driven by our past, but like making the decision of the thing that you want in the future and having that live your life. And it's kind of this, I don't like the term fake it till you make it when people like lie and bullshit about what they're doing, but this idea of, right, I'm going to write a book. What does that take? What do I have to be? What do I have to do in order to get that? And then you're driven by that. Like that's a great thing. So I guess in your work then, do you work with people on getting clear on that vision of who they want to be and what they want to achieve? And then they kind of put themselves in their shoes.
I start with all the ways that you'll undermine it.
That's good.
Right.
That's important.
So I start with like, why don't we lay it out? Like, what are the predictable thoughts, experiences, behaviors that when you put them all together amounts to the life you've got, right? Like, so if somebody says, I'm interested in love, I'll say, well, how do you pick a relationship apart though? Where do you start? When it doesn't go your way, what can we expect from you? And you'll actually see your model. You'll see how you do it. You'll actually see what you start to indulge, right? Old brain patterns, old moods and outlooks that arise, that the minute they arise, you don't see it as a brain pattern. You don't experience it as a brain pattern. For you, this is how life is. You don't get that it's your angle on it. So I always start with the way that I like to put it is all the ways that you will abandon what's possible. So abandon it. And how do I know that? Because you've done it many, many times. And then I'll start to deal with your relationship. So you said something earlier, you said be impeccable with your word, right? That doesn't just mean what you say. It includes that.
Mm-hmm.
It also means that your words actually have significance for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean for you. I don't mean... So another way to say it is... Do
you mean integrity?
Yeah, I mean, like, where are you in terms of, like, your personal promises and agreements?
Yeah.
Right? How many of them do you bend or break or shape or... Right? Integrity, by the way, is an all-consuming word that includes language.
Yeah.
There's an integrity of language. There's an integrity of your body. There's an integrity of your house. There's an integrity of your car. There's an integrity of what you eat and don't eat.
But with your language, it's like mean what you say what you mean what you say, do what you say.
Right. And can you hold yourself to it? Can you have your word triumph over how you feel when you're most challenged? Right? Can I, in those moments when that predictable me is arising, can I have the me that I say I am be victorious? Can I be drawn by that future? Can I snap out of the matrix of my automatic thoughts and behaviors?
So you have your clients work through their patterns and behaviors, and then there's work on them identifying them and making that choice to be more impeccable with their word and hold themselves accountable to who they want to be or who they say they are. Right,
and there's a really significant part in all of that. One of the fundamental aspects of existentialism is responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But not responsibility, blame or burden or guilt or shame or anything. It's none of those things. Responsibility for me just comes down to ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Can you own it? If you can't see it, you can't own it.
Right.
You got to be able to see it. You got to identify it. You got to be able to see what's going on behind the curtain with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could reveal or shine a light on what's behind the curtain, you could then include that in what you now need to be responsible for moving forward. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm no longer run by that. In fact, I have a say in it. Mm-hmm. But if it's just, if for you it just seems like random thoughts or behaviors, there's no way to be responsible for that. There's no way to take ownership of that because it just seems so random. But this is why I love personal growth and development. If you do the work on yourself, for me, it's about revealing things that you can now bring in-house and not explain away like some kind of voodoo. But you can bring it in-house and say, all right, so I can see that that's predictable for me. I can see that this is predictable for me. This is what I'm up against. And you'll see, and you will see that in your life, the only obstacle you're up against is yourself. There's nothing out there against you. Nothing.
And then again, is that what you mean about the taking responsibility?
Yeah. You have to look, you could spend a long time complaining about the hand that you felt as if you were dealt.
Yeah.
Or you could just do something about it.
Right. Because the complaining doesn't achieve anything.
Well, does it do anything for you? And then if you do something about it, then you might become somebody who can help other people do something about it.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to sit in the swamp, I mean, as we talked about earlier, I'm from Glasgow. But not only am I from Glasgow, I'm from the side of the tracks in Glasgow where they stole the tracks. There's some nice parts of Glasgow. That was not my part. Mm-hmm. Part of Glasgow I'm from is, steeped in alcoholism, poverty, welfare, drugs, abuse, physical abuse, violence. It was the part of the city that I'm from would make the Bronx look like Bel Air. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's some areas around me when I was a kid growing up. You don't go there when it gets dark. You just don't.
Yeah.
And so, I don't look at that like I rose out of that. That helped shape and form who I've become. But there are elements of that I'm just not okay with defining myself.
Right. I think that thing that you just...
I choose something else.
That's kind of a resounding sort of thing to remember from what you've just said is you can either complain about it or you can do something about it. And so It's just like, get a stop with the blaming and take some responsibility of what you can do now. And I see people that kind of go from job to job and there's always issues, right? And then it's always everyone else's fault. Yeah. At some point, you just have to kind of do this work that you're saying?
Right. Well, there's two things, right? So there's two parts to that, though. So one of the things that I'm not a fan of, by the way, is positivity.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of it. And I know people are. They love possibility. Okay, positivity, that works for them. Fine, you can do that. You got to watch with the positivity. It kind of anesthetizes you from the swamp that you're in. You'll kind of put a positive spin on it.
Yeah.
Often it can be really challenging because when it comes time to do the work on yourself, you might dismiss some of the stuff that actually is having a really serious impact on you. So you can get, it can filter what you're dealing with in a way that won't really empower you to deal with it. So that's the first thing. So if you try on the idea that if you are someone who has positivity, because it's a strength, but you got to watch for where it's a weakness, where you're letting things go that you shouldn't.
Right.
Step over things that you need to take on, and maybe making things seem okay that are not okay.
Yes.
But you've made them okay, and they become a burden. But you're so positive about it, you're like, well, it's not really a burden. I mean, I can manage. I mean, I'm fine. It's okay. So that's like a big part of that, right? You got to really watch out for
just being positive, but not like, but then blasting through things that you actually want to work on or deal with. Yeah. Right. It's like putting a Band-Aid over like a gaping wound. Like
right. I mean, some of the most disappointed, resentful, and hurt people I've ever met, most people would never guess it when they met them. Right? I mean, resentment is an odd bedfellow for people that are positive. It's like one thing I've noticed about people who are overtly positive is they're very negative about negative people. Positivity seems to abandon them in those moments. It's like cut all these negative people out of my life. Well, that's a pretty negative thing to do. I thought you were positive. So all of our character traits, especially, well, in particular, what I'm talking about are strengths, are great strengths, but there's very often no off button. It's just, and I apply that strength to everything. So one of my strengths might be being independent, which really works in a lot of areas of your life. And you'll often find, by the way, in your job, your strengths are at play there. But being independent is terrible when you're married. It's brutal.
When you're married, did you say?
Yeah. So if, let's say I'm independent, okay? And that's a character trait of mine, and I'm a salesperson. Independence stands me in great stead there. I can do great things being independent. And it's an answer to things, right? I'm very self-generative. I can get things done, right? I bring a lot of myself to the table. I can act independently. I'm just this kind of all-encompassing, self-generating kind of human being. Put that in a love relationship. When the relationship doesn't go well, your initial answer to that is going to be something along the lines of, I need time on my own to work this out. So there you are in a love relationship, working it out on your own. That's not a good strategy. You might want to work it out with the person you're actually in the relationship with.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, and I'm using independence as an example here, of course, but unfortunately, independence is a separate state. So as a way of being, it requires you to disconnect.
Right.
You have to be disconnected to be independent. And this is why I love ontology, because if you follow the beingness of independence, it includes judgmental. So you have to be in judgment, which also requires separation. The other aspect of independence that works against me is it's internal. So I go in. If I got a problem, I'm going to go in. I'm going to fix it by going in. And then the last weakness of that strength is it's a lonely state. You become alone. You can walk in a room full of people and experience being alone. And even though you're talking to them and getting along, you don't feel connected. You know, experience being connected. There's like a barrier between you and them. And in an ontological sense, that barrier would be your independence.
Okay.
That you were born with the possibility of independence that has now become a constraint. Does that make sense?
I just wonder whether, like, so what would be a state that would be more conducive for a person to be in? Because to me, I feel like there's independence, but you can be independent to support yourself financially and live alone, but you can still want to have relationships and connect and friendships. And so are you saying that we're always experiencing different ones? Like, because I don't think independence is inherently
well, when we went back, it's not a bad thing. Like I said, it's strength. The problem that we have as human beings with our strengths is there's no off button. So the people who have that kind of character trait for being hardworking, they know there's no off button for that thing. It just keeps going. It's relentless. And it's the answer to everything. Like, oh, just work harder. Right? For those that have the character trait for being analytical, they analyze everything. Everything. Right? Even what I just said, they're sitting there right now listening to this, wondering whether they are analytical or not analytical. And if they were analytical, what would that mean about them? And maybe I'm analytical, it might be a problem. I need to go read some books about that. Like, it's all analyzed.
But surely we're not all just one of those things. But surely people can turn them off. Like, I feel...
Yeah, no, you can.
Interesting. Okay, what's the... what would be your recommendation for that then?
All right. So if you just kind of get present to right now, right, like your reaction to hearing this news, right, I would assert one of your strengths is getting triggered right now. Like, it's trying to kind of wriggle out of it. Like, what do you mean? How do we, right? Which kind of flies in the face of perhaps Zen Buddhism, which is a little more about just being at peace with what's there.
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to understand. So I would say my state would be confusion or confusion.
All right.
Or understanding. That's probably my...
Give me the answer. Yeah. Give me the answer. So, and really that's what that's about. It's about getting the answer, like a definitive answer. So, but if you just start with the notion that if you actually saw what runs you, if you actually could see the mechanism at play, I'm not saying there's one of those states. I'm saying there's a very narrow band of those states. That narrow band of those states is what you would call yourself. Say, that's me. That's what I do, right? So a default character trait for me is being hardworking. Right? I'm driven to work, right? You go to the beach with me, it's not pleasant. I'm not sitting there like, oh yeah, just enjoy, seeing the sun. That's not how it works for me. It's like I get edgy and agitated and I've got to do something. Come on, maybe I'll do this and maybe I'll write a bit. And I should read a book. That's what I'll do. I'll read a book. So when I can let that be, though, when I can just acknowledge and recognize the drive to be hardworking and all of its characteristics, there's actually a separation that happens. Like it's here, but it's not me. It's what arises in me. Now, if you imagine being, so we were talking about earlier, like being, like a spectrum of being, hardworking is only one. So in every moment of every day, I have a choice. I have a choice to be. I can be loving. I do have it like a choice. But I need to get aware. I need to get cognizant of what's there by default, that if I don't recognize it, it runs me. There's no distinction between that and me. In fact, that becomes me, and I don't know any different. So in uncovering your strengths and the inherent weaknesses and all the tentacles of that, like I said, you're bringing that in-house. You're saying, that is one way for me to be. But what about all the other ways that I could be? What if in that moment of independence, and I can feel myself and experience myself pulling away, I declare my vulnerability. Like I let my guard down. I say, this is the moment when I usually pull away, and I'm not going to do that right now because I love you. Like that is somebody who recognizes what they're driven to do and has a say in the outcome. And mostly, and this was a lot of the work, by the way, that Jung did, of making the unconscious conscious, of revealing, of shining a light, of bringing to the surface that which one might have called fate. And in fact, It's not fate. It's the way you've become to protect yourself, to survive, to make it in this life. So there are ways, rather than an off button, more like an on button for something else. Like in every moment of every day, you are a potential, and you're an endless potential that without serious intellectual intervention, you'll live on a very narrow bandwidth.
Gotcha. Big idea. Well, it's a big idea for me. I think I'm getting that.
Yeah.
I feel like this idea around not identifying with certain traits of yourself. It's acknowledging that is a behavior that arises. That's not who you are. And you can observe that as a behavior, not as an inherent core. And then you're open to being having these other experiences, making other choices, doing things differently.
Well, remember, it's all housed in language, right?
Yeah.
So language is the house of being.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you, me, everybody else on this planet, we're in a constant conversation about something. That constant conversation includes your emotional state. I mean, if you talk about something that you're passionate about, even though you're not doing it right now, you're just talking about it, you'll experience passion.
Yeah.
It'll arise in the language, right? If you authentically tell somebody you love them and you connect with that human being, you will experience love. What I want to do with people is to wake them up to the notion that you're a masterpiece waiting to happen, that you're a landscape of being, and that your paintbrush is language. And that the beginning of that process of becoming somebody who creates yourself in language is by finally getting to the bottom of what's already there that you had no cognizance of creating, but you did create it.
And that's the crux of your work.
Yeah.
I like it. I love it. I'm going to wrap this up, but I would just love you to just quickly summarize the two books, and so that they know people can know where to get sort of more in depth on these things that we've been speaking about. Yeah.
So the first book is called Untitled Yourself, and it introduces, I think in a very real way, the damage that self-talk can do, but also give you this thing called 7 assertions. So that's 7 statements in language for you to begin exploring life from. Right. So if you explore life from a certain statement, if you engage with life from a certain statement, you'll see it presents you with very different things than you're used to.
Yeah. And
so it's about having people start to impact the quality of their life. And it is a very in-your-face book, but it's a very, I think people, from what I've gathered, and I'm thinking that the 1.5 million copies that it sold says something about that, but I think people get very inspired by that book. And then Stop Doing That Shit is the deep work, like revealing the darkness. It's not an easy book to read. It's not a long book. Sure, it's only like 40,000 words. You'll do it. You could do it in a day, but you'll want to take like copious notes. I ask you some pretty profound questions in it that you might even get depressed about, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going here, you know. But needless to say, by the end, like I spring you out of it. Good. And I show you a pathway to start really, like, not only realizing on your dreams, but having your life be lit up by that, even though you haven't accomplished it yet. Like the life you have being lit up by a future that you haven't quite gotten to yet. And you can get them in all good bookstores and Audible, and I do the audio book myself. And, you know, you can check out my website, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all those places. Wow. I'm a big stand that people get the work at a reasonable cost. And so, yeah, like I'm committed to people, and I'm passionate about people and making a difference.
I love it. I'll have links to all of that stuff in the show notes so people can find you and check out your books and all that good stuff. Just to wrap things up, can you leave our audience with a call to action, like a thing? Obviously, I want them to go and read the books because I think that will give them a good understanding of what we took, but something that they can do either in this moment or today or this week.
For sure. If you think for a moment, just that one thing in your life that you've been putting off, because everybody's got them. And you might have a lot of them, or you might have 10 of them, or you might be so snowed under by them, like you're like, I don't even know where to begin. Pick one. Pick one thing that you've been tolerating, putting up with, putting off, overcoming, one thing. And right now, as I'm speaking, what I would request you do is handle it. Now, you might not be able to completely handle it, but I mean, like, send the email, make the phone call, talk to the person, get up on your feet and handle one thing that you've been putting up with. And deliver on it for yourself. Like, I'm going to deliver on this thing. And here's what you'll realize. Your ability to impact the quality of your life is tremendous.
Yep.
And it's infectious. Once you start handling what you've been tolerating, putting up with, overcoming, that cleaning house rises you up. You feel better and better and better. And it really is about restoring a condition of workability to the life you've got.
Yes. And I would love, that's a brilliant one. Anyone listening to this, can you please just send us a message, info@upliftingcontent.com, with when you've done that thing. If you're watching this on Facebook or Instagram or something like that, give us a comment on the thing that you did in this moment after hearing this, because I would love to hear these comments.
Right. And then as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to go clean that desk behind me. So I've been tolerating that for the last 3 days. So I'm going to go do that as soon as I'm done here.
All right. I want to text afterwards to make sure that did in fact happen. Send me the picture. Yeah. See, we're doing it already.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm quite happy. No, I'm gonna have to think about what I've been putting off. I'm actually feeling very focused right now and like getting on top of stuff, like getting my finances on order, getting really on top of things. So yeah, I'm going to continue with that today. Gary, this has been brilliant, like deep and interesting, and I love it. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for, having me exposing my work to your listeners and your viewers. And, I'm just going to keep banging the drum and keep spreading the word.
That's what it's all about. It's the Uplifting Content Podcast, and the criteria is, can what this person is saying uplift someone's life in some way? And so many things of what you've said can be incredibly uplifting for people when they apply it. And I think that's the key thing, taking responsibility for yourself and doing something with this knowledge. But yeah, thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Eleni.
Bye. See you next week, everyone.